My dad kicked me out on my 18th birthday. No conversation, no warning, just my bags packed and waiting by the door. He stood there, arms crossed, and said, "You're old enough to figure it out. It's time for you to be a man." At first, I was too shocked to process it. I remember standing there with this weird mix of anger and hurt, thinking, this is it. This is how my life starts as an adult. I had nowhere to go, no plan. My older sibling, who had a family to worry about, stayed out of it. They didn't want to get caught up in the mess. And my younger sibling, well, they were still living under our dad's roof, so what could they really say? Everyone just kept quiet. That night, I found myself crashing on a friend's couch, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. I mean, it wasn't like my dad and I were ever super close, but I didn't think he'd go this far. It felt like he was just waiting for an excuse to push me out the door, and now that I was 18, he didn't have to justify it anymore. The next few months were some of the hardest of my life. I worked random jobs, waiting tables, stocking shelves at a grocery store, and even cleaning offices late at night. Anything to make enough money to get by. I found a tiny, run-down room to rent, and when I say tiny, I mean it. It was barely big enough for a mattress on the floor, but it was mine. I'd lie there at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had spiraled into this. There were days I didn't know where my next meal would come from, and through it all, my dad never called. Not once. It was like I'd been erased from his life, but I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fail. No way. I kept grinding, saved every penny I could, and after about 2 years, I finally got a break. I met someone who saw potential in me, an old friend of a friend who needed help with his small business. He offered me a job with more responsibility than I'd ever had before, and I jumped at the chance. It was the first time in years I felt like I had some control over my life. Slowly, things started to turn around. I worked harder than I ever had, learned everything I could about running a business, and saved every bit of money I could. After a few years, I took a massive risk and started my own small company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and I poured my heart into it. To my surprise, it actually started to take off. I was finally making real money. 5 years after being kicked out, I found myself doing something I had never imagined. I bought my first property. It was a small house, but it was mine. I remember standing in front of it, keys in hand, thinking, I did it. I really did it. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs just when you think you've made it. Not long after I bought the house, my dad suddenly reappeared. Out of nowhere, he shows up, acting like nothing had happened. At first, I thought maybe he was there to patch things up, to apologize or at least acknowledge what he had done, but no. Instead, he claimed that the property should be partly his, because according to him, without his tough love, I wouldn't have made it. You can imagine how that felt. After years of silence, he was suddenly acting like he had played some big part in my success. It was infuriating. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was boiling. My siblings, meanwhile, were caught in the middle. My older sibling, who had always stayed neutral, was like, maybe hear him out. My younger sibling, now grown and trying to stay out of family drama, didn't want to pick sides. But they all knew the truth. This wasn't about my dad helping me. This was about him trying to take something that wasn't his. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. A few days after that awkward reunion, I started getting legal documents. My dad wasn't just talking. He was actually trying to make a legal claim on my property. He had hired a lawyer and he was serious. At first, I couldn't believe it. The audacity. I spent sleepless nights going over every detail, every moment that had led to this. My head was spinning, and I felt like I was being dragged back into the same toxic cycle I had fought so hard to escape. Then something unexpected happened. My younger sibling reached out. They had been quiet for so long, but now they wanted to talk. When we met, they admitted that our dad had been pressuring them for years, manipulating them with guilt and control, the same way he had with me. They had felt trapped, But now that they were older and independent, they couldn't stay silent anymore. They offered to help me fight back, even if it meant standing up to our dad for the first time in their life. Together, we started to build a case. I gathered every bit of evidence I could from the day I was kicked out to the years I had spent hustling to make something of myself. My younger sibling backed me up, telling the truth about how our dad had treated us growing up. My older sibling, who had stayed neutral for so long, finally came around, admitting that they had always known our dad was in the wrong but didn't want to rock the boat. It wasn't easy, but eventually the case was settled. My dad had no legal claim to my property. I had one, but it wasn't just about the house. It was about proving to myself and to him that I had built my life on my own terms. The whole experience taught me a lot. Family isn't just about blood, it's about who stands by you, who believes in you, and who has your back when things get tough. My dad may have kicked me out, but he didn't break me. If anything, he pushed me to become stronger, more independent, and more determined to succeed. And in the end, I built a life I'm proud of without him. It took years to get here, and there were plenty of twists and turns along the way. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Every struggle, every setback, made me who I am today. And now, when I look at that property, the house that's all mine, I know it's not just a home. It's proof that I can overcome anything, even the people who were supposed to support me